I'm going to, because I feel like this is, I really feel like instead of just doing Joshua chapter 3, I'm going to do 3, 4, and the first verse of chapter 5, because I really feel like they fit together really well, and then we'll just slowly walk our way through 3, 4, and the first verse of 5. So follow along with me as I start in Joshua chapter 3 all the way through chapter 5, verse 1. It's not a terribly long section. Here we go. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and he and all the sons of Israel set out from Shittim and came to the Jordan, and they lodged there before they crossed. At the end of 3 days the officers went through the midst of the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, "When you see the ark of the covenant of Adonai, your God, with the Levitical priests carrying it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. However, there shall be between you and it a distance of about 2,000 cubits by measure." That's 1,000 yards approximately. "Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you shall go, for you have not passed this way before." Then Joshua said to the people, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow Adonai will do wonders among you." And Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, "Take up the ark of the covenant and cross over ahead of the people." So they took up the ark of the covenant and went ahead of the people. Now Adonai said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that just as I have been with Moshe, I will be with you. You shall, moreover, command the priests who are carrying the ark of the covenant, saying, 'When you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan.'" Then Joshua said to the sons of Israel, "Come here and hear the words of Adonai your God." Joshua said, "By this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will assuredly dispossess from before you the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Hivite, the Perizzite, the Girgashite, the Amorite, and the Jebusite. Behold, the ark of the covenant of Adonai, the Lord of all the earth, is crossing over ahead of you into the Jordan. Now then, take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, 1 man for each tribe. And it shall come about when the soles of the feet of the priests who carry the ark of Adonai, the Lord of all the earth, rest in the waters of the waters of the Jordan will be cut off, and the waters which are flowing down from above will stand in one heap." So when the people set out from their tents to cross the Jordan with the priests carrying the ark of the covenant before the people, and when those who carried the ark came into the Jordan, and the foot of the priests carrying the ark were dipped in the water edge, for the Jordan overflows all its banks all the days of harvest, the waters which were flowing down from above and rose up, the waters which were flowing down from above stood and rose up in one heap, a great distance away at Adam, the city that is beside Zaratan. And those which were flowing down towards the sea of the Arabah, that is the Salt Sea, were completely cut off. So the people crossed opposite Jericho, and the priests who carried the ark of the covenant of Adonai stood firm on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel crossed on dry ground, until all the nation had finished crossing the Jordan. Chapter 4, verse 1. Now when all the nation had finished crossing the Jordan, Adonai spoke to Joshua, saying, "Take for yourselves 12 men from the people, 1 man from each tribe, and command them, saying, 'Take up for yourselves 12 stones from here out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priests' feet are standing firm, and carry them over with you, and lay them down in the lodging place where you will lodge tonight.' So Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the sons of Israel, 1 man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, 'Cross again to the ark of Adonai your God into the middle of the Jordan, and each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Israel. Let this be a sign among you, so that when your children ask later, saying, "What are these stones? What do they mean to you?" then you shall say to them, "Because the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of Adonai. when it crossed the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall become a memorial to the sons of Israel forever. Thus the sons of Israel did as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, just as Adonai spoke to Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Israel. And they carried them over with them to the lodging place, and put them down there. Then Joshua set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan, at the place where the feet of the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant were standing, and they are there to this day. For the priests who carried the ark were standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything was completed that Adonai had commanded Joshua to speak to the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. And the people hurried and crossed. And when all the people had finished crossing, the ark of Yehovah and the priests crossed before the people. The sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over in battle array before the sons of Israel, just as Moses had spoken to them. About 40,000, equipped for war, crossed for battle before Adonai to the desert plains of Jericho. On that day, Adonai exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, so that they revered him, just as they had revered Moses all the days of his life. Now Adonai said to Joshua, "Command the priests who carry the ark of the testimony that they come up from the Jordan." So Joshua commanded the priests, saying, "Come up from the Jordan." It came about when the priests who carried the ark of the covenant of Adonai had come up from the middle of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up to the dry ground, that the waters of the Jordan returned to their place, and went over all its banks as before. Now the people came up from the Jordan on the 10th of the first month, and camped at Gilgal, on the eastern edge of Jericho. Those 12 stones which they had taken from the Jordan Joshua set up at Gilgal. He said to the sons of Israel, "When your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, 'What are these stones?' then you shall inform your children, saying, 'Israel crossed this Jordan on dry ground.' For Adonai your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed, just as Adonai your God had done to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed, that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of Adonai is mighty, so that you may fear Adonai your God forever." Now it came about, chapter 5, verse 1, when all the kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan to the west, and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard how Adonai had dried up the waters of the Jordan before the sons of Israel until they had crossed, that their hearts melted, and there was no spirit in them any longer because of the sons of Israel. So there it is, folks. That is our reading. Now, I want to point out a couple of things that struck me in this section that I think were very interesting. First, as I am wont to do on occasion, I want to ask you if anyone has small general observations of perhaps items in this reading that stuck out to you, things that really caught your attention. That if you want to mention them briefly, we won't go into them deeply at this point. But what things struck your attention?
We tend to forget the good things the Lord does for us. We're leaky vessels.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else notice anything interesting or anything that you would comment on, Tracy?
Well, there's several things, but I just wonder if there's something to the fact that they're supposed to say 2,000 cubits behind the ark, and that I see it as this ark going ahead of them as this being the mercy seat, and this being like the Messiah who goes before you. Deuteronomy 31:8, I think, says something about that. I'm Yehovah who goes before you. And then, he was here physically approximately 2,000 years ago, so that he's crossing over first, and we are to stay behind and cross over afterward. So I just was wondering if there's maybe a connection to that. And then also the fact that they're going through the Jordan, and the Messiah was baptized in the Jordan, kind of like as this physical representation of being baptized, and then we coming after. And then my last observation is about the stones that they pick up and place in this area. I've often wondered, and I tend to think there's a connection to when John the Baptist is baptizing in the Jordan, and the Pharisees are saying something to him, and he says something like about God can make these stones speak if he wants to. And I just think there might be a connection to the Israel and the stones and we being these spiritual stones, and that those stones are there as that representation.
Excellent. Excellent observations. All of them very good. Anybody else catch anything? Go ahead, Marie.
Just a little bit more about the stones. The stone left in the riverbed or the dry riverbed represents the old creation, and as the new stones come out, it's a picture, like Tracy said, of the baptism that occurred in the Jordan, where you go in and you go on. I mean, we physically go under a water baptism, but we know it's a spiritual baptism, and through the spiritual baptism, we immerse as new creation. So each tribe put a stone there to show the old body. Then they took a new stone and placed out of the Jordan to show the new creation that occurs. So it's a picture of the baptism itself. That's what I'm seeing. I'm also recognizing that you notice the priests are there, and each tribe has a stone. So even the Levitical priesthood, even Levi has a stone, if you're going to say the 12 tribes are there. So back on what I am seeing again with the first set of believers, if we look in Revelation 14, they talk about the children of the 144,000, where we know are the chosen people throughout generations. But if you notice, the 12 stones that are taken out are the original 12 tribes. So I'm seeing the Levitical priesthood representing the first set of believers who recognize Yeshua at his first coming. And the second set of believers will be coming in after the first believers, who are the Levitical priesthood, are the stones that we see of the 12 tribes. That's what I'm thinking.
Very interesting. Excellent observations, everybody. Fantastic. Well, I think there's so many wonderful imagery, so much wonderful imagery going on here with the Israelites crossing over the Jordan. I mean, the obvious thing that you see, in relation to this being a replay of the Red Sea, crossing over, crossing away. And, we've mentioned this before, but I think it bears, repeating that, we break away from Egypt, representing that spiritual darkness that is, kind of like being rescued from the kingdom of the adversary and set free from the spiritual powers, and going away from that darkness kingdom into the kingdom of light, and getting to know Yehovah through our wilderness journeys. And it's such just an amazing foreshadowing picture of that time period of moving through the wilderness, and really relying on the provision of God in a very real way. Because I think, and I'll bring this up to you in just a couple of minutes regarding some things that change here. For example, when we're in the wilderness, God's physical presence is very much present. I mean, you can see the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud, and we're being fed manna every day, and the water is coming from a rock, and there are miracles among us as in our time in the wilderness. But now, as we are getting ready to cross over the Jordan into the Promised Land, several key things change. We do know from some readings later that at this time, the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire, the fire cloud, if you want to call it that, is gone. It is no longer with them. The manna stops. They're going to be eating the fruit of the ground itself. They're going to have to get water from springs and wells. so there are definitely some changes in their physical interactions with God. They become more, well, they really have to start learning to walk by faith and not by sight. That's one of the big transitionary things that is happening here when they cross over the Jordan is, you're going to have to walk by faith. You're not going to be able to walk by sight anymore. And that really makes sense to me from a spiritual perspective, as you see, and I know that many of you have also, I see in my own life, have seen, over the years, when you first come to a relationship with God, he seems very tangible and very close. And unfortunately, that changes. Some people feel like it's like, oh, my spiritual life became a little bit more stagnant, and I couldn't feel that closeness with God as much as I used to at the beginning. And some people describe that as that first love type of feeling. That you're really excited and you're really passionate about God when you are first starting that relationship with Him. And I think that we have a misconception a lot of times that God is that maybe we are not walking in closeness like we used to, and therefore He is withdrawing from us. But I don't necessarily think that's the case. It certainly could be the case if you're no longer walking in closeness with God and relying on Him daily and coming to Him in prayer and hearing from Him through His Word. You can certainly sense a distance between the two of you. But that doesn't necessarily mean, I don't think, that that's just par for the course. I think what is also true is that God does withdraw from us somewhat because He wants us to chase after a little bit more. He doesn't want us to be going by our feelings. Our feelings are very iffy, and we need to learn to walk by faith in what we hear and not by what we see and what we sense with our soul. I want to call it the soul, those feelings that you get. Tracy?
Interesting to me, because when you made that connection of that first love, because I can relate, I'm sure, but many of us can. When we first came to all this, it's almost like a new relationship where you're so excited and you just want to be with that person all the time. And then as you grow in your relationship, it kind of became like a marriage. Mm-hmm. Like you have to work at it. It's not just going to be flowers and whatever all the time.
Yeah.
But it can get stronger to where it's like I was just thinking, he used to talk to me in dreams all the time when I first was coming to all this. I hardly ever have dreams now, but I don't think it's because I'm not walking with him anymore. I think it's just now I hear him through his word, whereas I couldn't really do that before. So it's a mature relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation, and I think we often. We feel that sense of closeness because of that first love, and we get really excited. And I think He gives that to us for a reason. It is very. You see more and more clearly as you age in the Lord, so to speak, about that metaphor of a marriage really, really kicking in. It really is like that because I have known people who really relied upon in their relationships with women, for example, those intimate and tender feelings that you had at the beginning of the relationship. And when those itchy feelies kind of fade away after 6 months or something, then the relationship just kind of goes downhill, and it's like, oh, I got to go find a new one so that I can rekindle those feelings. It's like, yeah, you'll never have a real relationship that way. You'll be chasing women the rest of your life.
I have to say something else to that, because then you see people doing that.
They do it spiritually.
Now I'm going to go off to the conspiracy theory, or I'm going to cling onto this. It's all about knowledge and trying to get that feeling back.
Yep.
Rather rather than growing in that relationship.
Yeah, it's such an amazing thing. And I know from my own relationship with my wife, and I have spoken a few words about my relationship with my wife before. I think that my relationship with my wife is fantastic. She doesn't, but
yes, I do.
I know I'm kidding.
I
need to be kicked regularly. That's how we keep our marriage strong. She kicks me regularly. But no, I and I tease her. I do. That is also what keeps our marriage strong. But I have to learn, because I had warm and fuzzies. I had warm, fuzzy feelings about her for a couple of weeks. But
it was longer than that.
It was longer than that. I'm kidding. No, but I had to then learn to listen. And I had to learn to shut up. I know what you're thinking.
There for a few decades.
I know I got stuck there for a few decades. That is correct. It takes a long time. I don't know if you were, but I've been, with this woman for like 32 years. That's a long time. 31 years.
1849.
Yeah, so it's a long time, and it's taken me a long time, and it hasn't always been awesome. But I will tell you that having a good relationship, in spite of not having these warm fuzzies, that's a different type of relationship. It's certainly much deeper and more meaningful than having the warm fuzzies. But Tracy's absolutely right. Bless her. In my opinion, that. You can chase those warm fuzzies spiritually with your relationship with the Lord. And what you're doing is you're chasing emotions. Bless you again. And chasing emotions is really fraught with difficulty, because your emotions are really, really ephemeral. I'll use that word if you know what that means. Short-lived. Bless you. That cat. Ephemeral means short-lived. It's not long-lasting. And I think that this chapter really pivots us to where we start to see the Lord maturing His children, pulling away these things that their eyes see. I mean, Messiah told us, blessed are the ones who believe who do not see these miracles and stuff like that, who believe without seeing. That is us. We have been living in a time, in a place, in a time period where we don't see a lot of that in our daily lives. Now, some of us do, and I don't discount at all that many people do have a really intimate and close relationship with the Lord, and they might even have miracles in their lives, and they are seeing things that are really visual cues. And I don't want to say that that's an indication of an immature walk with the Lord, but I just don't think it's abundantly characteristic of mature believers, generally speaking. Marie, did you want to say something? Or Wayne?
Like you saying, they're walking by faith, not by sight anymore. Like the Bible talks about periods of time where God was silent for hundreds of years, but it doesn't mean that in between those years that men and women of God weren't walking by faith and still praising God, even though they couldn't hear from Him for a long, long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that transition really comes with hearing from the Lord in a different way. I really think that's the best way that I could characterize it, is really hearing from the Lord in different ways. Not necessarily the emotional connection that you had before, that it needs to mature beyond that, and that you'll hear from the Lord through other people. Once you learn to really start to put other people first in your lives and really take on their lives and really genuinely get involved in their lives. I know that, one of the things that I like small talk as much as the next guy, but I also, if you've had any kind of decent conversations with me, you know that I like to dig below the surface and find out how people are doing. And some people are pretty open, and they'll tell me exactly what's going on in their lives, and I appreciate that. Others are more guarded, and I understand that. Not everybody's, emotionally open to share, what's really going on behind the surface. But I think having those real conversations with each other, where we're being real with each other and we're really talking with each other about the real struggles that we face and how we're really doing in our lives, that's when you get to know what is really going on the inside of people. That's when you start to have more of an impact in their lives, and I think that that's when God starts to speak to you in different ways through the lives of other people. That it happens like that for me anyway. I know that as I deepen my study, as I learn more about His Word, as I try to read more carefully, more thoroughly, the language, the phraseology, the Hebrew words just speak more, and you start to learn in a deeper way. You start to communicate with God in a deeper way, and your prayer life. I know that prayer is a really challenging one for most believers that I have known in my life. That, getting engaged in prayer in a real and a full way is very challenging for many people. Whether it's, I just, I kind of try to do it in the morning, but every time I start talking to God, I just fall back asleep. Or I try to talk to God before I go to bed and I just fall asleep. Or I don't know what to say. I'll say the Lord's Prayer, or I might say the Shema. Let me ask you a question. How many of you, by a show of hands or a indication of some kind, how many of you actually pray the Shema at least once a day? Okay. The prayer is such a hard thing, and I'll tell you this. We've talked about this before, and this is really about having that, trying to get a better connection with God. And I think we've talked about how learning as we mature as Christians to align ourselves with God through prayer, rather than asking God for things or asking God for what we want in our lives. Or even praying for others. I know that is. I mean, if I'm thinking to myself, well, what are the elements of prayer? Well, part of it is praising God, rehearsing His attributes to yourself, whether it's through Psalms or whether it's through some of the Selichot, the Hebrew prayers that Hebrews pray. They're all, many of them, almost all of them, are based on Psalms. Excuse me, just rehearsing the attributes and the character of God to yourself really does something very interesting. The other part of prayer, to my mind, is asking God for your needs, asking God to intercede in the lives of your friends, your family members, to heal people, to encourage people, to strengthen people, to guide people, to heal people. And then the third part is asking God for yourself, to guide you and to help you and to strengthen you in your daily walk. And I will tell you that there are all kinds of like prayer books out there. I don't know how many of you have ever really done that, but a Hebrew prayer book is a pretty wonderful thing. The Selichot is something that I would encourage you to take a look at. You can get PDF copies online, and I can even email you a copy that I have. It's hard to find one in English, a decent one in English, but I have one that is, it's like the first page is Hebrew, and then the next page is English, and then the next page is Hebrew, and the next page is English. It's just alternating back and forth. But it has, the Selichot prayers are a prayer set for each day of each of the 7 days, and it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to read through the daily prayers for that day. And they're marked day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and Sunday being day 1, you just follow it. And I will tell you that I have begun doing that over the last couple of weeks, and that's an amazing thing. And I really encourage you to try it, because it just fills your mind. These Hebrew prayers include elements of confession of sin. They include the Shema. They include the 13 attributes of God, when God, put his hand over Moses in the rock and he's proclaiming those attributes. They include all kinds of praise from the Psalms. It's a really neat, just feels like a complete package of the things that you want to say to God in your worship. And it's just a neat thing. And I can tell you that that's one of the ways that I have gotten a little bit closer in that. I have just put a message in the chat box there myself for how you spell selichot. So you can and I can send you that. I have a PDF copy that I can send you. It's just a wonderful thing. So I want to encourage you to spend a good amount of time with your Bible. Spend a good amount of time in prayer, because that's really how you're going to be staying close to God. That's how you're going to be really making those connections and feeling that sense of closeness as you continue to mature in your relationship with Him. So sorry for digressing in such a dramatic fashion, but I am now going to... does anybody have any comments, questions, or concerns regarding that little segment before I move forward just a little bit? Okay. Please. Oh, yes, please.
Just a question about chapter 4 there, where he's talking about coming out of the Jordan on the 10th of the first month.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any significance or comparison we can make to the land being selected on the 10th of the first month for Passover?
Oh, yeah. I thought you said the land. You said the lamb being selected. Yeah, that's a great question. I have thought about that, and I'm not. I'm not. I frankly don't know, Mikey. I really don't. I haven't, frankly. I'll tell you the truth. I haven't dug as deep as I need to into chapter 4, and I hope that as I continue to study this week and we pick up more, like next week, I might have something to share in that regard. But I can tell you that, yes, I definitely feel like there is something going on here. It's not for no reason that they're crossing the Jordan at this time, the 10th of the month with the selection of the lamb, and they're in another chapter or two, they're going to be performing circumcision, at Gilgal, and the rolling away. I mean, that Gilgal means rolling away, so rolling away their reproach, taking part in. The cat is like attacking Angie's butt. That's hilarious. This series of activities that are happening right here in that time period is definitely significant. But I need to dig a little bit deeper. That's a great question, Mikey. But I would say, we have here. Right there in the very beginning, it shows in verse 1 of chapter 3 that Joshua is rising early in the morning. That should perk up your ears right off the bat, because you can see on several occasions in the scriptures, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but just a little Bible study tip, especially if you're using electronic Bible software. When you look at whatever translation you're reading in, and you see that the words in the text say, rose early in the morning, if that's the way it's been translated into English, and you then go to your search function and you type in rose early in the morning, every time those Hebrew words are translated into those English words, it's going to show you where that phrase has been used before in the whole Bible. And it's interesting to note, and I'm not going to go into this too deeply right now, but I would recommend that you make a note to yourself to do that search, because you'll see several characters throughout the Tanakh where it says that they rose up early in the morning. And we've mentioned this before when we were studying back in Genesis, because I believe that one of the first instances of this appearing is in Genesis, I want to say 19, but I could be totally wrong about that. When Abraham arises early in the morning to take Isaac to sacrifice him on Mount Moriah, to lift him up to Yehovah. And that phrase, rising in the morning, is used often and is a reference to a righteous man moving with zeal to fulfill the word of Adonai that has come to him and has given him a task to do. And I have heard some people say, well, that might mean you need to get up early in the morning. Well, it doesn't matter whether you're a morning person or not. It really has to do with being a person who is zealous to do what the Lord has given you to do, regardless of what that is. The Genesis 22, thank you so much. Chapter 22, verse 3 is the first mention of rising early in the morning. So I want to encourage you that this, to me, really is talking to me about what it is that your task is to perform. And I don't care whether it is you being a housewife or you being a righteous plumber or a preacher or a person who's in ministry. It doesn't really matter. The point here is to be zealously going about serving others and doing the will of God for whatever it is that He has given you to perform. And this phraseology of rising early in the morning is totally characteristic of a righteous man moving with zeal to fulfill his task. And you see in each one of these instances, people who are mightily used of God are being tremendously blessed and experiencing God in a very profound and real way when they move with zealousness, activity, passion to do the things that God has given them to do. Yes, it's like giving God your time, first thing, absolutely. It's like you have said, and many other people have said, and I have said, you cannot ever find time to serve God. You cannot find time to read your Bible. You cannot find time to pray. Time is not found, it is made. You have to make time. It's just a matter of priorities. And I know that that's harsh. I know that that's tough because we all get busy and we all get sidetracked and we all got things we have to do. But I can tell you this, especially in the days that we are living in, nothing is more important than your relationship with God, your spiritual standing with God, your connectivity to God, your connectivity to the people around you who are also God worshipers. Your prayers and intercessions on behalf of the other people of God. I know that our land that we're living in is coming apart. We have a group of people who are clinging to lawfulness. We want law to prevail. It's God's law. Whether it's the Constitution of our country, because that is God's law. I personally believe, like many of you do, that the Constitution of the United States was founded primarily on God's law, and we want to see that prevail. We'd love to see it even strengthened. but then we are opposed by a whole half of our population, it seems, that is driven by a crazy mob of people who are ruled by their passions, by their emotions, by whatever the group feels like at any given time. That's not law. That's being ruled by feelings. And it can be very chaotic. It can be very uncomfortable. It can be very tumultuous. And I think it reminds me of the book of James, where it says that that type of wisdom, quote unquote, does not come from above, but is earthly and demonic, and is twisted and is tossed to and fro on the waves. It's chaotic and it's crazy. And you're sensing that. You're feeling that the rules are changing all the time, that people's passions and their feelings are changing dramatically and shifting and swinging left and right and all over the place, and you don't even know what's coming next. It's certainly not founded upon a solid base of this is what's right and this is what's wrong, and we're going to rule according to what is right and what is wrong. That is gone. And I feel like more strongly than ever that the amount of time that you are able and willing to dedicate to connecting with your God and connecting with the people around you, that is what is crucial in the days that we're living in. And I think that it is exhibited a lot in these passages in the opening chapters of the book of Joshua. And I'm going to move forward just a little bit here. In verse 3, for example, you've got this mention that at the end of 3 days, it says, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of Yehovah your God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing the ark, then remove from your place and go after it. Now, this is an interesting thing. If the book of Joshua is a prophetic foreshadowing of the return of the Messiah Yeshua, do you see a place in the modern world for the return of the Ark of the Covenant? Well, we don't know what happened to it. I mean, if you watch Michael Rood, you might have some ideas about, speculation. Somebody found it, I don't know whether that's true or not, but it certainly could be. Do any of you have any idea in your mind that the Ark of the Covenant would actually be revealed again in the last days?
I think Messiah is the Ark of the Covenant.
Angela says she thinks that the Messiah is the Ark of the Covenant. And I think that Tracy and Marie are whooping over there. They're on board with that idea, and I certainly like that idea. Tracy?
The guy from Torah Family,
Steve Mutria.
he proposes that there could be some kind of resurfacing of the ark or a ark, and that it could actually be a deception for God's people. I tend to agree with that.
Yeah.
Also, what you just said something that made my ears perk up, so I wanted to share it.
Please.
Talk before about how Messiah was baptized in this Jordan, and then he goes out and he calls 12 disciples, which represent these 12 tribes, which we see these stones are representing. But it's neat because it says, what you read here is that when you see the Ark of the Covenant and the Levites bury it, you get up and you go after it. And that's what Messiah said, you follow me. And immediately they got up and followed him. So I think there's for sure a connection to that here. I think that's pretty cool. Totally agreed. I absolutely agree. And I think that your idea about, the Ark of the Covenant, the presence, the physical presence of Adonai in the world at that time is often exemplified by that glory, the Shekinah that appears between the wings of the cherubim over the Ark of the Covenant. And that we do associate the Messiah Yeshua as the physical presence of God in this world. And so I think that connection between the Ark of the Covenant and the Messiah Yeshua is very much a good connection to make. Marie, did you want to pipe in there?
Yes. 11, when two witnesses are taken up, and whatever is said, the angels say that now is the beginning, the kingdom of God is coming, and the heavens open up, and you see the Ark of the Covenant there. And I think that is just showing you Yeshua getting ready to come to earth. And there are other examples of where the Ark of the Covenant is really pointing to Messiah.
Yeah.
So,
a shadow of things to come, but not the exact replica of it.
Yes. Good insight.
Torah.
Right. Good insight. And I think Tracy, mentioned Steve Mutria talking about how he thinks that there might be a case to be made that the Ark of the Covenant would actually make a return in these days, and possibly that somebody would set up the a tabernacle, and that maybe the Ark of a voice speaks from the Ark of the Covenant, and that it actually tricks people into thinking, this is God. We need to follow this person who's connected with it, or whatever that may be. And that's certainly possible. Stranger things have happened. It wouldn't necessarily surprise me. But I think one thing that you want to think about, and this is connecting with verses 3 and 4, where it talks about there shall be a distance between you and it of about 2,000 cubits by measure, and you will not come near to it, that you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way heretofore. I don't think that that's just talking about that the Ark of the Covenant is going to show you the path that you need to take. I don't think that this is a visual representation of GPS coordinates, kind of Google Map feature. This is not what is being discussed here, I don't think. I think that what's more interesting to me is that for the time being, think about this. The people, for some time, 40 years, this generation and the generation before, had been led by this fire cloud that was leading them wherever they went. That when they get up in the morning, they look to see if the pillar of cloud is still there. And if it gets up and it starts moving, it's time to pack up. They were being led in a very visible way by God in that way. But now they're following the ark. The ark moves from within the camp, in the center of the camp. I want you to picture in your mind that in the center we have the Levites and the tabernacle and the ark. And the whole thing is parting, the crowd of people is parting, and these priests come through the center of the camp, and they are now moving that ark. And they are moving to the head, which is not usually what they do. So now the whole congregation is being led by the ark and by a group of Levitical priests who are moving that ark. And Joshua is telling us, move to follow that ark. Now, if that ark represents the Messiah Yeshua, which I think it certainly does, that's a fascinating picture to think about. Also consider this whole idea about make sure that you don't get too close to that ark. Now, I know that 2,000 cubits, it's an interesting little phrase, and you can, and I certainly did, type into my little search function 2,000 cubits. And where do you find that the first time? In the book of Numbers, chapter 35, verse 5. Which is interesting because the first mention of 2,000 cubits is where it's talking about how the Levites will inhabit these towns, and that there is a distance around the outside of the town where the Levites have control of that land, and they will farm and they will do work on that land. It is a section that is 2,000 cubits from the wall of the city out 2,000 cubits. That is the land that the Levites control all the way around a town that belongs to them and cannot be transferred. Remember that a house in a city is not covered by the Yovel law of inheritance. City houses, when you sell it, you got the right of redemption for 1 year and 1 year only. Once it's sold, it's sold. But not the land that is outside the city. For 1,000 yards, 2,000 cubits around the city, that is perpetually in the hands of the priests. So that's the first time that you see this phrase 2,000 cubits used in the Torah. Interestingly, that measurement of distance, 1,000 yards, is also what is known as, in the New Testament, a Sabbath day's journey. Now, I think that there's some interesting things about this. I can't quite put my finger on it. Some prayer, some further study, more examination of different spots in the Torah and in the Tanakh where you see this phrase, 2,000 cubits, is needed. But I do see some very interesting things about the Ark of the Covenant moving to lead the people and how there needs to be this distance. You need to be able to see it, but you cannot get close to it. And I know that in my own mind for a time, I was thinking about how does this go down visually? I mean, is there, the Ark of the Covenant where the men who are carrying it come right up to the water, and then as soon as they step in, the waters, upstream just rise up into a giant heap. And the waters downstream are completely cut off. And then, standing there are the priests standing right inside the river, and all the people are passing right on by. Well, you can't stay 1,000 yards from that ark and pass right next to it. You're too close. You can't get that close. But consider this: the word Yarden, the Jordan River. What does anybody know what that word means? Tracy? Going down. That is correct. So I think that what we're seeing in my mind, I'm seeing it this way, and you can tell me what your perception is, that it comes down to not a huge steep angle or anything, but if you had the priests with that ark 1,000 yards upstream, you could see them. 1,000 yards is not a terrible long distance. They'd be smallish in your sight, but you could see them. A handful of priests carrying that ark. Is the ark covered or is the ark uncovered? I don't know. It doesn't tell us. But it's I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know how to answer that question. But I got myself wondering, did they actually put the takash skins and everything on the ark as they're traveling with it? You would think so. Because we know that the normal humans, the Israelites, did not ever see that ark. They did not ever see that ark. When it was built, it was covered. It was inside this inner sanctum of the Holy of Holies. Nobody can go in there except the high priest. And whenever they tear it down and move it, they cover it with the actual covering that's in there. So no one ever sees it except for the high priest once a year. Tracy?
Yeah, I mean, if they were following the Torah, it would have been covered.
Mm-hmm.
And I think perhaps we would have been told something that might have gone down that was bad, like with Uzzah and the ark, that they were transporting in a way that was not prescribed.
Right.
We are told about something bad that happened there. So
right.
My assumption is that it was.
Right. So mine too. My assumption is that they had the ark covered like they should, and that the bulk of the people are downstream 1,000 yards from the Levites who are crossing the stream 1,000 yards upstream. That also gives the bulk of the people. Remember, we've got a very large group of people here. And when those priests are 1,000 yards away, that gives the bulk of the people the opportunity to clearly see these group of Levites walk into the water, and they can clearly see that water. In my mind, I literally see the water rising stories high in the distance. And that right there from where they're standing all the way down to the Dead Sea, it's dry as a bone. Dry land appears instantly, and all of the people are moving across in huge groups 1,000 yards downstream from where the Levites are standing upstream away so that everybody can see them. But then you start to think about this distance of 2,000 cubits, and you start to think about how the ark itself is replaced the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud. And I think we have to remember that when the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud disappear, the people are going to panic. They're going to not be prepared for that. The visual presence of God has disappeared. It's gone. There's no more manna. There's no more pillar of cloud. There's no more water from a rock. And it says here that the officers passed through the camp and commanded the people. They needed to give the people this encouragement, and they needed to tell the people, things are changing here, folks. The program is changing. How we're doing things is changing. Now, when you're going to be following the priests and the Ark of the Covenant, that bears further study. And I'm gonna leave it off right there, but look into that a little bit more, because I think that's quite fascinating. Now, I want to pause for just a second because I wanted to ask Angela, did you want to come and make a couple of observations?
There was a chiasm.
Angela is going to come and share an interesting chiasm that she has discovered here in this section. So I'm gonna let her sit in this chair.
Oh, no. Can they see this?
They might be able to. Let's see. I don't know that they would certainly probably not be able to read it. I doubt that they'd be able to read it. You can't read that, can you? No, it's too... I mean, I could move it closer to the screen, but I still don't think that that's going to be terribly easy to read. No, it's not.
Okay, well, this will be something fun for you to do if you want. In this next week, because we're going to cover this more, right?
Yeah.
And you're talking about how there's something in chapter 4, right?
Yes.
And you were reading it, and I noticed some repetitions there. And if you want to just look for yourself in chapter 4, verses 1 through 11, in verse 1 and then verse 11, look for that word clean. In your other translations, it's going to say complete or completely or something like that. But it's the word clean. It's, what is Strong's H8552. So that was the first clue, was this word clean in verse 1 and the word clean in verse 11. And then if you move back, if you move in from the clean, because I'm talking from outside in here, right? Okay, so from clean, you have the word Passover. And then if you go to verse 11 and you back up a little into verse 10, you'll see the word Passover. And then if you back up from there, you'll see that Joshua is commanded to speak to the people. And if you go up to your first Passover, you'll see the Lord spoke to Joshua. And then moving in from there, you have the instructions regarding the stones, and this includes the words, the feet of the priests, and lodge, which was a clue because that's kind of a weird word. That's an unusual word. So it says something about the lodging place. And so then if you move down to the end and you go backwards into verse 9, it's when they actually did the stones, the instructions for the stones. And again, it mentions the feet and a lodging place. And then if you move in from there, you have 12 men, the midst of the Jordan, before the ark of Adonai, your God. And this is where I think that a lot of those things that you guys were just discussing, that there might be some clues there, because you have a little bit different phrases or different things included. Like here, it mentions they carried them on their shoulder, that they took up the stones and carried them on their shoulders. And down here, it says that they carried them and laid them down. So here's where you start to take your chiasm and you start to compare. You go A, B, because there was a similarity, but there's also differences. So there might be a clue in that. And then you move in from there, and it says, according to the number of the tribes of Israel. And again, if you go down here and move up, there's that phrase, according to the number of the tribe, or the children of the tribe, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel. It's the exact same phrase. And then if you move in from there, it mentions somewhere around verse 6 or 7 that this is a sign. If you move up from here, it calls it a memorial. 2 different words. The sign is the oat, and the memorial is like the reminder with the zakar word. And then if you move in from there, here's where it becomes real clear that he's honing in on something important. Because in verse 7, it says, in the first part of verse 7, it says, cut off the waters. And at the end of verse 7, it says, the waters cut off. So you can see that mirror image right there. And right in the center of that is, I think, what's the most important thing that all of this hinges on, which might help with your framework when you're thinking about and asking questions, is the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord passed over the Jordan. That's like that. I think that might be the main point, the thesis of all of this. The Ark of the Covenant of the Lord passed over the Jordan. And that's where you get really messianic there. But that's, so if you want to, and this is just something I noticed when he read it, so I didn't have a chance to compare things, but that might be fun. If you have questions about this section, like you guys have been asking, I think that might be helpful, like a study guide, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's where you got to do some digging, and you got to think about it a little bit more and try and figure out, what is being said there. So that's certainly fascinating stuff. Thank you, Angela, for sharing that. That was very kind. And I will. I'll try to make sure that when I upload the video tomorrow, that I will take a picture of that and impose it on the. Yeah. No. Very, very good stuff. Thank you. So, yes. There's one. One thing that I wanted to discuss with you briefly, and I'd be interested to get your opinion and your insights on this. When I was reading this section here and I was looking at this 2,000 cubits thing, I was thinking of why is it important that there's these 2,000 cubits separating the people from the ark. And I know that's, it has something to do, very much, I think, with the holiness of God. I really do think that. And that, the Messiah Yeshua is the holiness of God. But a part of that kind of appeared to me in my mind that spoke about Jewish tradition, which I know that many of us struggle with Jewish tradition. Some of us are more resistant to Jewish tradition than others. I know that some of you are, you're very embracing of Jewish tradition, and others are very reticent about embracing of Jewish tradition. And I'm not, I've never been one to say whether you should or should not embrace Jewish tradition, but I had opportunity this week as I looked at this 2,000 cubits thing and how the Jews interpreted a Sabbath day's journey to be approximately 1,000 cubits, and that is still the ruling today in an Orthodox Jewish concept framework, that a Sabbath day's journey today is you may travel 2,000 cubits, approximately 1,000 yards, outside the walls of the city where you reside. That is still, and you will actually see, and I saw this in a news story like a year and a half ago, where there was some township that was upset with the Jews who lived in their community, because what the Jews had done was they had 1,000 yards around the little town where they lived, they had gone out on the side of the road and put up like markers to basically let all the Jews know, here is the maximum distance, 1,000 yards. And they were putting up these signs in contradiction to like city council codes or something that said you couldn't put signs up on the side of the road.
1,000 out because it would make it 2,000 once they came home?
No, it's 1,000 yards out from the city boundaries. So, what a Sabbath day's journey is really dependent upon the city in which you live. A city that you are free to move around the city according to Jewish tradition, the rabbinic interpretation of what a Sabbath day's journey is, you can travel all around your city. And you can also travel 1,000 yards outside the city boundaries and be totally compliant with rabbinic law regarding traveling on the Sabbath day. But that is clearly Jewish tradition. The Torah does not tell us that there's some certain distance you're not supposed to travel beyond on the Sabbath day. But then you get to thinking to yourself, well, how is it that the Jews come up with these traditions? Well, there's always something. There's always something in the Torah that informs a Jewish tradition, a Hebrew tradition. There's not any Hebrew tradition that I'm aware of where it's literally just plucked out of the air. There's always some passage of the Torah which is either overt or covert and kind of hidden. There's always some basis in the text on which they make these judgments. And as I was having one of the Torah studies that I did with my children this last week, we talked about Jewish tradition because there was a book that we were reading about, how does a Christian relate to the Torah, and also how does a Christian relate to Judaism and the traditions of the rabbis, the oral Torah. And it occurred to us as we discussed it, there was something that was quite interesting. And here's the metaphor that I will give you to contemplate. In our country, I often have used the metaphor that the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights, for example, the amendments to the Constitution, are like the Torah in a roundabout type of way for the purposes of illustration. You can think of the Constitution of the United States and the articles that are attached to the Constitution of the United States like the Torah, the Ten Commandments. It's really analogous. Now, we as a country are not very old. We haven't been around here for very long. I mean, they just signed that document. They just created it in 1783. It was signed. That's not very long ago. But people in our country, for hundreds of years now, have needed to figure out what exactly did our founders mean when they said blah, blah, blah. And so it was up to local courts at first to interpret what does that mean. And then it went to state supreme courts to make an even more affirmative judgment. And if you didn't like that, and certainly people didn't, that would go to a district court, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals or the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. That's a higher court, and they will make a distinction. We think this is what the founders meant, and your interpretation of it is either affirmed or not affirmed. You can disagree with that, and it'll go all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court's job is to interpret what does the intent of the framers of the Constitution and the Articles mean, and how does this interpretation that you have conform? So what we've ended up with in our country is some very, very basic nuggets of truth in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which have been expanded to hundreds of millions of pages of legal precedent, as interpreted by legal scholars whose job it is to study our texts and tell us what did they mean. I think that you can pick up on the point that I'm handing out to you here. All of the Mishnah and the Talmud and the oral Torah is nothing but a bunch of legal opinions about what did Moses mean when he said that. So, it's kind of, and you can, just like you can look at the Supreme Court decisions. Did the Supreme Court decision in Roe versus Wade accurately reflect the founders' interpretation of, that children should be aborted? I don't think so. Did the founders of the Constitution think that in regard to the Second Amendment of the Constitution, that it was acceptable to restrict the rights of people to bear arms in certain situations? I don't think so. And I'm certain that there's a whole slew of decisions that have been made in regards to our Constitution where I would say that we all would agree that the bulk of the decisions that have been made in regards to our Constitution by legal scholars are probably fairly accurate. People of goodwill and good conscience have interpreted the instructions of our founders of our country and have done the best job they can to make it work for the society that we live in. But we know that there are several examples where we think that they went too far. They ascribed things to our founders that we do not think that the founders intended to do that. It is the same way with the oral Torah and the traditions of the Jews. Yes, they have made decisions, and I think you can see Jesus arguing with them in regards to certain traditions that they had interpreted from the Torah. But remember this. Those interpretations in their society, in biblical society, is the law of the land. Yeshua is willing to argue the case, but he's not willing to necessarily overtly violate those cases, because that is established case law, and he's not exactly a rebel seeking to overthrow the religious establishment. He's willing to argue with them on certain fine points, and I think he clearly did that. But there are also several examples when you look more carefully of Yeshua and the disciples and several other characters following the oral Torah, the traditions of the elders. They just did. That was the society that they lived in. And I think that's different for us because we don't come from a Hebrew society. We don't live in a Jewish society that's ruled by legal precedents based upon the divine instructions from God. We don't live in a society like that. But as far as interpreting what is the rabbinic interpretation of certain commandments in the Torah, it's just defined by how you live your life and how you interpret those instructions in the Torah and how you're going to incorporate them into the way you live your life. You have your own traditions now. Whatever you do in practice is a tradition. However you interpret the commandment to observe the Sabbath day. Well, over at our house, we like to do this, and we do this, and then we do that. That's your tradition for how you interpret the command to observe the Sabbath day. And I think that we have to, if you haven't seen this, Halissa Alewine did a whole series on this very same subject called Pharisee, Friend or Foe. And she also wrote a book about it that is called, I think it's called Seed, Tares, and Traditions or something like that. It's a fascinating study, and I encourage you to take a look at it because I think that we are, many of us, very biased about Jewish traditions. And I say that there are some that are neat, there are some that are wonderful, some that are misguided, but you need to use wisdom and you need to use the spirit inside of you and your understanding as best you can to determine what is best for you and your family and how you intend to interpret the words of our God and live them out in your life. So there's that. And that's the final thing that I will say in our study for this evening.